Look at the whole teams in the House.
I'd like to talk a bit about the Auditor General's report, which you said you had reviewed as part of this. And the Auditor General found that Ms. Vershuren not only held the conflicts of interest you referred to in your opening statement, but mismanaged and had a conflict in interest in a number of other transactions. Does your report cover that when Ms. Vershuren mishandled conflict when she granted Universal Matter, Inc. a payment of $225,000 on March 9th, 2021?
First of all, mismanagement is not part of my remit. So I'm looking only at conflict of interest. We actually looked at every single decision that Mrs. Vershuren took. My colleague Michael can give you details.
Yeah, so beginning at paragraph 61 of the report and going all the way to about paragraph 74, we've lumped together all of the different instances of votes or decisions that were taken. So in certain instances, Ms. Vershuren had declared conflicts of interest but had abstained instead of recusing. In other instances, she had declared conflicts but voted outright. Another, she failed to declare a conflict and had voted. And then also the COVID relief payments where she relied on internal advice.
So she didn't breach it twice, as your report said. She breached it multiple times based on that. Can you tell me how many times she breached it?
In total, there were 24 instances.
24 times as chair, she breached the Conflict of Interest Act.
24 times.
So, and your report deals with just the NR store and the Mars and the Vershuren Vanity Center that she set up and their roles. That's in it. So when you looked at it, did you look at any other governor and council besides Mr. Ouimet? I do have some questions about Mr. Ouimet's in your report, but did you look at any of the other GICs? Because the Auditor General also named considerable number of other GICs who had conflict of interest.
We start an investigation and look when we have reason to believe there's grounds for an investigation or when we're being asked for. In this case, we were specifically asked for by Mr. Ouimet to look after Mrs. Vershuren and Mr. Ouimet, and we did so.
Do you not have the power to investigate anyone you want? You don't have to wait for a parliamentarian to ask. You can, when you are made aware of conflicts of interest in your mandate, can you not go at that? When you see that the Auditor General has named other governor and councils, why didn't you expand your report? 82% of the transactions that the Auditor General looked at, she found directors were in a conflict of interest. That's not a mistake of a legal advice. That's a culture of conflict of interest.
Yeah.
But you forget, I can, as you quite rightly saying, self-initiate, but I have to initiate it if I have reasonable grounds to do so. The Auditor General report came after we issued the report on Mrs. Or just shortly before we issued. Was it before or after? No, who came first?
The Auditor General's report came first, yeah.
And we came about a month after.
So are you going to initiate, now that you're aware of way more instances of conflict of interest on your own?
What purpose would it serve? My job
Well,
is
I'll tell you what,
let
since
me
you asked
finish
me the question.
my answer. I can, if I make it, what can I do? I can expose. That's all I can do. I can't fine, I can't fire.
But with respect, Mr. Commissioner, that's your job, is to expose conflicts of interest. And the Auditor General found 82% of the time. You dismissed Mr. Ouimet and you said it was de minimis. It is inappropriate for somebody who's a public office holder to personally benefit. And in the case that you outlined, they personally benefit because that loan or that grant from the board that he was on that he voted for benefits that company. Not only did he do that, Mr. Ouimet, but he actually has numerous other conflicts of interest exposed by the Auditor General. So I ask again, since your report doesn't deal with the governor and council's overall and the culture of conflict of interest, will you take a look at all those other instances, including Mr. Ouimet?
And as I've answered you before, what purpose would it serve? All these persons...
Then what purpose do you have a job if you're saying that you don't have any responsibility whatsoever to look at conflicts of interest?
No,
Just
I do.
because, isn't that what you do? You expose them and let the public and parliamentarians decide what should happen since there is no sanctions. So why is it that you dismissed Mr. Ouimet when he had Lithium, Nouveau, and Swirl Tech, all his conflicts where he voted millions and millions of dollars to companies that he had investments in. Your report is inadequate, and you should initiate conflict of interest investigations where governor and council have been abusing their position 82% of the time.
Let's start at the beginning. My job is there to expose conflicts of interest. But if I find them and I expose them, then the person has to answer to the public, to the Prime Minister, or to the Speaker of the House, as the case may be. And my job is done basically in exposing it. I can't fine, I can't...
Yes, that's true, but you're not exposing them.
But they have to be in office. When they are no longer in office, what good does it serve to
So your
expose?
excuse is it's okay for a conflict of interest and you don't have to look at abuse of taxpayer dollars as long as they're no longer in office?
Abuse of taxpayer dollars is the Auditor General's job, not mine. Mine is conflict of interest, pure and simple. And there is no conflict if you're no longer in office. You do not have a conflict anymore. I can
So if
point
I
out
commit
that
a conflict of interest while in office and I don't get caught, it's no longer a conflict of interest?
Of course, it was a conflict of interest. If I wanted to, I can. You are out of office. I start an investigation and say, while you were in office, you had a conflict of interest. End of story.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'll now yield the floor to MP Van Bynen.
Mr. Barrett?
Commissioner, Mr. Keno, good to see you. I have a hypothetical question for you. If a designated public office holder like a minister had a financial interest in a company like Telesat, and Telesat, which just received a more than $2 billion loan from the government just days ago, would that minister need to have recused themselves? What would that look like for that minister with that interest in Telesat?
You're asking me, as usual, sorry, not as you, as you have before, theoretical questions. I gladly answer a factual question. A theoretical one, you'd have to give me far more detailed facts before I can answer. You say
Okay.
there was a grant to Telesat.
Sure.
By who? By cabinet decision? On what base? Under what authority? Who was the minister, etc.?
So just this past week, Justin Trudeau announced that Mark Carbon Tax Carney is going to be advising him on all matters finance. And days after, a company that Mr. Carney has a financial interest in received $2.14 billion in an announcement by the Prime Minister. Mr. Carney has been hired by the Liberal Party, it appears, to avoid the scrutiny of the Conflict of Interest Act. Does this present a skirting of the? It clearly presents as a problem to Canadians. Is Mr. Carney a ministerial advisor by the definition set out in the Act?
No, because he is advising the Liberal Party. What the Liberal Party does or does not is not government action. The government may adopt the advice that was given by Mr. Carney, but in effect they're adopting the advice of the Liberal Party who got it from Mr. Carney. It's the way they structured it right now. He is not a ministerial advisor. So
It's an appropriate practice then for parties to provide, we would imagine, non-public information, for the government to provide non-public information to their employees at the party when those employees have serious financial positions in companies that could stand to benefit from that information.
Well, the party gathers information from all sorts of sources, etc. They can pay for it, they can get it for free, etc. They then use that information in order to position themselves and decide on their policy. That is a perfectly normal procedure. There's nothing of conflict of interest here.
So there's no conflict if Mr. Carney receives non-public information from the Department of Finance and then uses that to provide advice to the government because he's employed by the party and not paid by taxpayers, though the advice that he provides could materially benefit him and his other.
Your supposition is that he receives non-public inside information from the Department of Finance.
Point of order, Chair.
That's
Shut up,
the
Brian.
we make. I have no proof of that. If that is
Excuse me, Commissioner.
That would be a
Pardon me,
different
Commissioner.
situation.
We have a point of order. I'll just,
Sorry to interrupt, Commissioner, but I just find it a little bit troubling that Mr. Barrett hasn't asked a single question about SDTC. He's using hypotheticals to ask the witness a question, which is great, but it's not what we heard to study. My understanding, I know he supports, world-dominating billionaires, but that rather than Canadian companies, but that's not that's not the axe that he should be grinding today. It's SDTC.
See a point of order?
It's relevance.
thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Thank you, Mr. Turnbull, and I accept your point of order in that we had a 1064 meeting to call for this 3-hour special meeting to discuss the Commissioner's report on SDTC. So I'd ask you, Mr. Barrett, although I am generous in terms of the questions that can ask, to try to be relevant to the topic for which you had a whole lot of resources deployed this summer to bring this meeting forward specifically about this topic. So please keep those rules in mind. You know the rules of relevance. And I'll yield the floor to you back. You have a minute and a half.
I agree that Mr. Turnbull is quite troubled, Chair, as he stated. When we're talking about conflicts of interest, like Ms. Vershuren, you can check the box there, Ryan. Randy Boissonneau's company, Global Health Imports, was given $30,000 on December 30th, 2023. Minister Boissonneau was a 50% partner in that company. Were you aware of that?
Sorry, when was
Point
it
of
given?
order.
Yes, Mr. Turnbull.
I thought the topic for this meeting was SDTC. Is the
I'll bring
witness
it-
answering questions
I'll
on
bring
any
it back.
topic that Mr. Barrett
was
so
15
chooses,
seconds.
or is this an actual focused discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. And yes, I agree with that point of order. Mr. Barrett, keep it on the topic of the meeting, please. Thank you.
It was December 30th.
That was a company you're talking about, the contract from Election Canada?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. It was in a company in which he was an owner. At that point, he is no longer an owner of that. Just being an owner in a company, he had no involvement with the operation of the company. We have looked, as you know, at his involvement.
But were you aware at the time that that had occurred?
No. It came out, I read it in the press as you, but I'm sorry, in Elections Canada was buying, I believe, masks or gloves or something like that for $30,000 through
Is it not a violation of Section 13, Sub 2 of the Act?
How is it a violation? He's not running a company. Can he not?
It says they can't have an interest in a partnership or private corporation that's party to a contract with a public sector entity.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. That's all the time you had, and I would